Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Tonight's story was requested by a viewer who wanted to hear about ghost marriages. If there's any topic you'd like me to cover, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. And after telling so many ghost stories, I've realized sometimes people are far more terrifying than ghosts. This one is different. It's not legend, not rumor, but a chilling case from real life. Because Chinese names and places can be complicated, I've simplified them for clarity. But remember, this story really happened. It was a damp summer night. A fine rain kept falling over Yuankang, a small town in China. The fields and open land were shrouded in mist, and the whole village felt as if it had been smothered. Under a shed at the edge of the village, a coffin lay silently. The lid had just been nailed shut, the wood still damp, its surface catching the flicker of lamplight. There should have been only the sound of rain and wind. Yet at midnight, an unexpected noise began. It was the scraping of fingernails against wood, thin and sharp, coming from inside the coffin. Then came the heavy thuds, shaking the boards, as if something inside was desperately trying to break out. Dogs began barking all across the village, their cries overlapping in panic. And people realized tonight would not be just another ghost marriage. At the same time, on the other side of the village, a farmhouse was brightly lit. The main hall was draped with red silk and decorated with the double happiness symbol. Yet on the altar table sat a black and white funeral portrait. Red and white stood side by side in the same space, half wedding, half funeral, filling the air with a chill that words could not describe. In the portrait was a young man, just over 20, with gentle features and a smile forever frozen in place. He was the only son of this household, who had died unexpectedly a month earlier. His mother, Madame Chan, dressed in mourning cloth, slumped before the altar. Her tears had long dried up. Her wailing faded into the candlelight, leaving behind a heavy silence. Beside her was her brother, Uncle Chan, pacing inside the room. His shoulders were broad, his face stern, but beneath the surface, his heart was restless. That night was meant to complete a ghost marriage. According to old village customs, a young man who died unmarried would suffer in the underworld and might even bring misfortune upon his family. So the family gritted their teeth and paid money to a matchmaker who delivered a coffin holding a young woman. It was said she had just passed away, still unmarried. If the two could be buried together, then both worlds, the living and the dead, would be appeased. For the living, it was a way to find peace of mind. For the dead, it was to mend the gap left by fate. At least, that was what Uncle Chan told himself. But then, a terrified cry came from the village entrance, shattering this fragile comfort. Old Wang, the man keeping watch over the coffin, came running back in panic. His face ghost white, his body shaking. Dogs barked wildly in the distance, as if providing a chorus for some unknown terror. In everyone's mind, two dreadful words rose up at once. The dead has risen. On this night, what was supposed to be a quiet burial ritual was instead driven into an unfathomable abyss by a sound from within the coffin. Old Wang kept watch there. At first, he heard only the steady rhythm of rain on the canopy, but at some point, another sound began to seep in. It started faintly, like fingertips brushing wood. Gradually, it grew clearer, like nails raking hard across the coffin lid, shrill, piercing. He held his breath, cold sweat trickling down his back. The sound did not stop. It grew faster, sharper, until it became heavy thuds that made the coffin tremble. This was no illusion. Moments later, he staggered back into the village, pale as death, gasping for breath. His panic unsettled the mourning hall. Women covered their mouths, eyes filled with fear. Young men tried to act steady, but none dared step forward. The words, "The dead has risen," grew heavier in the night air, pressing on every heart. Some tried to comfort themselves, whispering it might only be a wild animal trapped in the coffin. No one was certain. No one dared go closer. But the burial hour was fast approaching. The rain beat against the eaves like countless hands knocking, urging on a ritual that should never take place. At last, several strong men gathered their courage. Holding flashlights and shovels, they returned to the coffin. The beam of light fell on its surface, revealing a slick sheen, as though something inside had breathed against the wood. Everyone held their breath, waiting quietly as the rain and the barking of dogs overlapped in the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Some secretly sighed in relief, thinking perhaps old Wang had only misheard. Then several hands worked together, prying loose the nails. The lid creaked open inch by inch. Just as the first gap appeared, a sharper sound burst forth. Nails clawing hard across the boards, frantic and shrill, like something struggling desperately to escape. The flashlights shook, their beams trembling across the coffin's edge, and every heart seized tight. One man forced calm, muttering under his breath that maybe it was only a wild cat trapped inside. But in the very instant, the lid was fully lifted, and in that split second they saw a woman in a red wedding dress, face deathly pale, black hair hanging loose, suddenly sit up inside the coffin. Several young men scrambled away in terror, dropping their shovels as they fled in panic. The dogs barking filled the whole village, while women screamed and slammed their windows shut. The entire night was swallowed by fear. And still the red-clad figure sat rigid in the coffin, hands flailing wildly in the air, as if tearing at some unseen barrier. Her wet hair clung to her face, covering half her eyes, her body trembling under the lightning's glare. That sight left every witness with a chill deep in their bones. This was no corpse, yet it was not quite the living either. After the chaos, the whole village fell into silence. The rain still fell, the barking of dogs slowly faded, and only the wind howled through the narrow lanes. Those who had fled back looked ghostly pale, shaking all over, unable to form complete sentences. Some swore they had seen the woman in red sit up and scream. Others flatly denied it, insisting it must have been lightning and illusion. But no matter the explanation, the words, "The dead has risen," hung over everyone like a shadow. Inside the hall, Uncle Chan said nothing. He simply sat with a grim face, quietly watching the crowd. In his heart, he knew better than anyone. This ghost marriage had cost $30,000 in bride price. If the bride truly showed such strange signs, all that money would be wasted. Worse still, if word spread, it would not only bring bad luck, but shame to the entire family. After a long silence, he made up his mind. Forcing down his fear, he gathered a few of the braver young men, armed with hose and flashlights, and set off again into the storm toward the wasteland. The coffin was still there, lying across the mud. Water churned all around, the canopy above snapping sharply in the wind. The woman in red still sat stiffly inside, her wet hair hanging down, her hands waving wildly in the air, as if desperately trying to say something. The men staggered, hesitant to come closer. One even stepped back, his face turning green. But Uncle Chan held down his terror and fixed his eyes on the figure. He noticed that although her face was pale, it did not have the lifeless gray of a corpse. Her lips trembled. Her throat seemed to quiver with breath, though no sound came out. Her eyes, though cloudy, were moving, looking at them, pleading. At that moment, Uncle Chan's heart jolted. He realized this was no resurrection of the dead. It was a living person. The woman in red gestured frantically, her mouth opening and closing without a voice. She was not a ghost, but mute. Perhaps she had never been dead at all. This discovery did not ease the fear. It made it colder. For how could a dead body suddenly turn into the living? And who had placed a living person inside a coffin, nailed it shut, and prepared her for burial? At last, the villagers understood. What they faced that night was not the supernatural, but a far darker mystery. Once the news spread, Yuankong town was no longer calm in the night rain. The woman in red was lifted onto a rough wooden cart and taken to the town's hospital. Doctors confirmed she was alive. Weak and voiceless, yes, but her breath and heartbeat were there. The discovery sank heavy into the hearts of all the villagers who had gathered. The police quickly stepped in. Lights at the local station burned all night, files and testimonies piling on the desks. At first, the clues were scattered. Who was this woman? Why was she inside a coffin? And who had treated her as a corpse, sending her into this ghost marriage? Medical checks revealed the first layer of truth. The woman in red was named Li Ju. She was not dead at all. She was deaf and mute, with clear signs of intellectual disability. She could not explain herself, nor even understand why she had been placed inside a coffin. Soon, the investigation led to the go-between, Madame Hu, a woman from Hunan who had long been secretly connected to a so-called ghost matchmaker. The one she spoke of was named Li, over 60, blind yet with a cunning mind, running a trade that thrived in the dark. The deeper the police dug, the darker it became. This was no isolated case. In a culture long pressed by the weight of valuing sons over daughters, many families still craved wives for their men, even if the bride was dead. Some were willing to pay for a ghost marriage, hoping to quiet worries or fulfill tradition. That demand was Lee's opportunity. He wandered streets and bus stations, searching for vagrant women. Most were disabled, deaf, mute, or mentally impaired. With no one to care for them and little defense against deceit, they were easy prey. Lee played the part of a kindly old man, luring them home under the guise of shelter. In truth, he saw them as nothing but goods. Once in his hands, he would drug them, knock them unconscious, disguise them as corpses, and sell them to families desperate for ghost marriages. 30,000, 50,000, each deal brought him profit. This trade was not a one-time act. Over time, it grew into a black market chain. Some scouted women, others handled transport, others found buyers. Money moved, lives were trampled. When police finally tracked the trail, arrests were made across Hunan and nearby villages. Li and his accomplices, Ruan, Li King, Wang, and others, were taken. By then, the truth was already chilling enough. These men treated human life as a tool, women as livestock, even coffins as mere containers for their transactions. The night rain continued, muddying the streets of Yuankong. The women rescued that evening stood under the light, some blank, some trembling. Their shadows wavered on the walls like rows of silent ghosts. But they were no ghosts. They were real, forgotten lives dragged back from the edge of darkness. With the police crackdown, the hidden chain was finally cut. Li and his accomplices were hauled into custody, their faces showing no remorse. only the shock of being exposed. They thought they could hide forever in darkness, forgetting that no shadow can escape the law. At the rescue shelter, Li Ju sat quietly on the edge of a bed. Her face had regained some color, but her eyes remained clouded. She could not tell her story, nor truly understand what had happened to her. From time to time, she lifted her hands, making broken gestures. Those hands were the same ones that had pounded against the coffin lid, pulling herself back from the edge of death. News reports spread, and at last, distant relatives recognized her. After years of being lost, her family rushed to confirm her identity. When they did, they wept uncontrollably. For the first time in this cold tale, a faint warmth returned. But for many other nameless victims, there would be no such reunion. Their names, their faces, sealed inside coffins, buried in soil, erased into silence.